The sun rose slowly over the endless Pacific, casting a faint golden glow over the waves. In the distance, the horizon trembled with the promise of war. 4 massive carriers, pride of the Japanese Navy, cut through the water like giants. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Names that meant power, prestige, and invincibility. The men aboard believed nothing could stop them. They had trained for years, drilled for months, and now they carried the hope of an empire on their decks. Every flight of planes, every gun turret, every engine meant years of human effort, sweat, and skill. And yet, as the morning mist rose, the horizon hid a secret. Somewhere out there, across the vast blue, American ships and aircraft were waiting. Not just ships, not just men, they were backed by a machine no single human could match. The Japanese admirals had plans, precise and meticulous, honed over decades of naval tradition. Every movement calculated, every strike choreographed. But even as they approached Midway, they felt confident. The Americans had been beaten before. Their carriers had been sunk in other battles, their fleets scattered. How could they imagine that America had a rhythm to war, a relentless engine that replaced what was lost faster than the Japanese could even grasp? At 0600 hours, the first planes took off from Japanese decks. Bombers, torpedo planes, fighters, all moving with silent precision. The Pacific was quiet except for the hum of engines and the occasional call over the radio. Below deck, sailors manned guns, hearts pounding, believing today they would claim a decisive victory. Every pilot knew the weight of expectation. Every sailor felt history pressing down on their shoulders. They were not just fighting ships, they were fighting for the honor of a nation, for the legacy of their emperor. Across the ocean, American radar stations flickered to life. Small dots on screens, distant yet unmistakable. Commanders in the U.S. Navy breathed, calculated, and acted. They had been preparing for this. They had lost before, yes, but they were learning, adapting, growing. While Japan relied on experience and tradition, America relied on speed, scale, and relentless production. Ships could be sunk, pilots could fall, but more would rise in weeks, in days, sometimes in hours. That was the machine the Japanese could not see. That was the industrial pulse that beat faster than any fleet. And soon, the Japanese admirals would realize that Midway was not just a battle. It was a mirror showing the limits of human skill against unstoppable production. At 0730, Japanese planes reached Midway. From above, the atoll looked calm, innocent even, with small airfields and runways barely visible under the morning sun. But the Americans had set a trap. Aircraft were hidden, bombers armed, fighters ready. The first wave of Japanese planes struck, and chaos erupted. Explosions shook the ground. Flames licked the edges of hangars. On deck, sailors scrambled to control fires, to reload guns, to save what they could. Yet, in the skies above, American planes dived with precision. Torpedoes found targets. Bombs hit with deadly accuracy. Ships once thought invincible began to burn, smoke rising in thick black plumes, twisting into the sky. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, all taking fatal hits. Hiryu fought on, alone now, but the momentum had shifted. What Japan had assumed would be a swift victory turned into a nightmare. Years of training, months of preparation, thousands of men, lost in hours. It was not just a battle lost, it was the shattering of a belief. Japanese carriers sank beneath the waves, taking pride and confidence with them. Admirals stared at reports, disbelief in their eyes. How could the Americans recover from this? Surely, such losses would cripple them. Surely, they could not replace ships, planes, and trained crews so quickly. That was the assumption that had driven Japan into the Pacific, the assumption that would now be tested against a harsh reality. America had learned, and it had a rhythm. While Japan still counted losses as permanent, America counted them as temporary setbacks. Each ship destroyed was a signal to build 2 more. Each pilot downed was a reason to train 10 more. The scale was incomprehensible, a tsunami of industrial power that could not be stopped by tactical brilliance alone. As the smoke cleared over Midway, the Japanese admirals could only watch. They had underestimated the speed of American recovery, the depth of industrial reserves. Shipyards back home roared with activity. New carriers were not handcrafted over years, they were built in assembly lines, steel welded in days, decks prepared in weeks. Engines roared to life, planes rolled down runways, pilots trained in months instead of years. The Americans did not just fight with ships and men, they fought with factories, railroads, and steel mills. The Pacific had become a theater of machines, not just men. And the realization struck hard: Japan could not keep up. On deck, survivors of the Akagi and Kaga clung to debris. Smoke stung eyes, flames licked edges, but the human cost was only the surface. The deeper blow was psychological. Confidence shattered, pride crushed, strategy questioned. The Japanese Navy had relied on perfection, on skill, on tradition. Now they saw that even perfection could not match multiplication. One ship sunk by bombs was replaced by two rolling out of dry docks. One pilot lost could be replaced by dozens trained in parallel. America fought with arithmetic, and arithmetic was not a skill Japan had mastered. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, American production accelerated. Detroit, Philadelphia, Seattle, and Boston all pulsed with life. Shipyards churned steel, planes rolled off assembly lines, engines tested, decks assembled, every screw, bolt, and rivet in place. America's industrial heart beat faster than any human heart could endure. Each week, carriers were completed. Each month, fleets grew. Pilots trained faster, engineers built more, sailors boarded ships. Losses were temporary. Scale was infinite. Japan could fight battles, but America fought calculations. And calculations, no matter how precise the Japanese admirals were, always favored the nation with the deepest reserves. Back at sea, Japanese radio chatter grew desperate. Orders repeated, plans adjusted, strategies revised. Hiryu, the last operational carrier, moved alone, trying to strike back. Waves of planes launched, but every move was reactive, every attack measured against the damage already taken. The machine of American production, unseen yet unstoppable, was already working. Ships replaced, planes rearmed, men ready. For every strike Japan made, America absorbed, adapted, and grew stronger. What Japan thought was final, America turned into preparation. Midway had not just destroyed carriers, it had revealed the impossible mathematics of the war. Skill and courage mattered less than steel and assembly lines. Tradition and precision mattered less than speed and redundancy. Japan had fought brilliantly and lost strategically. The truth was not in battles, it was in factories. Survivors of the Japanese fleet spoke later of that day. Smoke, fire, and chaos were unforgettable. Yet, what haunted them more was the thought: even if we win every battle, can we match the machine? The carriers we lost were symbols, but the scale of American replacement was a warning. Ships lost today, replaced tomorrow. Men fallen, replaced in weeks. Factories working endlessly, assembly lines that never stopped. Japan had fought the Pacific as if battles alone would decide fate. America fought with arithmetic and scale, and in arithmetic, Japan was always behind. In the weeks after Midway, Japanese strategy shifted. Plans became cautious, movements slower, attacks calculated but hesitant. Confidence was replaced by fear, not fear of men, not fear of tactics, but fear of the machine. Shipyards could replace losses. Factories could replace carriers. Engines could replace planes. Men could be trained and deployed faster than Japan could destroy. The Admirals' maps, once symbols of power, now reflected limitation. Every loss highlighted the impossible. They had fought bravely, brilliantly, but against a system they could not stop. Midway had revealed the truth. War was no longer just courage, tactics, or experience. War was speed, scale, and unyielding industrial rhythm. And Japan had no rhythm fast enough to match. As the Pacific waves rolled endlessly, the lesson was clear. Ships would sink, men would die, but America's machine would continue. Each carrier lost would be replaced. Each plane destroyed would be rebuilt. The cycle was relentless. For the Japanese Navy, pride had been destroyed, confidence shattered, and hope weighed down by mathematics. Midway was not just a battle. It was the moment they realized that they were fighting a power far larger than the fleets before them. They were fighting a nation that could replace, rebuild, and recover faster than they could ever destroy. Thundered through the night. They were their smokestacks breathing fire into the skies, their machines hammering steel into shapes of war. America was not simply recovering from Midway. It was transforming. Each shipyard became a battlefield of its own, where sparks rained like molten stars and where the crash of steel on steel echoed louder than cannons. Japan's admirals had believed 4 carriers lost would cripple America for years. Instead, in less than a year, new Essex-class giants slid into the Pacific, gleaming, armed, and ready. It was unthinkable. Japan's tradition demanded perfection. Carriers were crafted like treasures, slow and meticulous, each rivet checked, every plane tested. A single vessel consumed years. But America worked with speed. Carriers rolled off assembly lines like automobiles, produced in parallel, built by thousands of hands working around the clock. Escort carriers too, smaller but numerous, patrolled seas and delivered planes to distant islands. The balance of power was no longer about tactics. It was about multiplication. In Tokyo's war rooms, the silence was heavy. Maps lay crowded with red pins marking what was gone. Admirals stared at reports that grew darker each week. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, all erased in days, and in their place, America fielded replacements faster than they could be sunk. Officers whispered the same question again and again. How can this be possible? They had gambled everything at Midway, believing the United States would be crippled. Instead, the horizon now filled with more enemy ships than before. Across the ocean, the fleets marched forward. Carriers bristling with planes, destroyers flanking like wolves, submarines prowling beneath, an industrial tide sweeping island after island. Every Japanese victory turned hollow. A ship sunk today reappeared tomorrow. A pilot lost was replaced in weeks. What Japan saw as decisive blows, America saw as temporary setbacks. The war was no longer a contest of admirals. It was a contest of factories. On the decks of Hiryu, the last of Midway's carriers, sailors fought bravely, launching desperate strikes, their planes soaring into the smoke-filled skies. But even they must have sensed it, that every attack, no matter how daring, could only delay the inevitable. Their carrier burned, their decks shattered, their hope fading. Behind them, the ocean swallowed Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu forever. And far away, in American shipyards, replacements already waited. This was the true terror Midway revealed. Japan was not fighting a nation. It was fighting an engine that turned steel into warships, oil into firepower, and ordinary men into the crews who would never stop coming. Midway was not only the loss of 4 carriers. It was the loss of belief that courage and skill alone could decide a war. From that day forward, Japan's leaders understood. The machine would keep moving, wave after wave, until the Pacific was no longer theirs.